What are the police doing here?
Something happened, Minnie. Something terrible.
Who would do this?
Well, they're holding Russ.
The truth will come out. I didn't do this.
Trust me.
The Thing About Pam. This is Pamela Marie Hupp, or Pam, and she was born on October the 10th, 1958. She's currently serving a life sentence in Missouri for the 2016 shooting of Louis Gumpenberger. If it were as straightforward as that, then there would be little more than a murder trial to cover. However, there is much more to Pam's story than that.
You want answers! I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
There's been at least one case of embezzlement, a case of fraud, a case of forgery, another murder of a woman called Betsy Faria. There was the wrongful conviction of Russ Faria, Betsy's husband, and the death of Pam's mother, Shirley Newman, in 2013. As you'd expect, these deaths and other incidents in which Pamela has been intricately embroiled in one way or another have not gone unnoticed by the media. There's been extensive reporting from the KTVI in St. Louis, 6 Dateline NBC episodes, and a Dateline NBC true crime podcast. On top of these, a miniseries featuring actress Renée Zellweger as Pam called The Thing About Pam premiered on NBC in early 2022. So take a deep breath and we'll unpack The Thing About Pam. Life before death. Pamela Newman grew up in Delwood, Missouri, a suburb of St. Louis, and attended Riverview Gardens High School. Whilst still a young adult, she had a number of jobs in the life insurance industry, perhaps foreshadowing what might be to come. On 2 occasions, she was fired for forging signatures. Pam married Mark Hupp, becoming Pam Hupp, and the pair in 2001 settled in O'Fallon, where she worked as an administrator for the State Farm Insurance Company and flipped houses on the side via a company called H2 Partners LLC. By 2010, Pam had stopped working and was claiming disability benefits for back, leg and neck pain. In 2011, Pam and Betsy Faria, a friend who was terminally ill with cancer, reportedly collected money for a family also impacted by cancer. Now, several years after this, it was discovered that the family didn't know about the collection, and when information was presented to Lincoln County authorities in 2014, it was not investigated further. There's no evidence to suggest Faria knew the fundraiser was questionable, with her friends recalling that she said she was excited to be helping a struggling family, even though she herself was dying. One of them said, "This is going to be a legacy for her, to leave something like this behind in her memory." Where did the money go? Well, I'm pretty sure I know, and by the end of this video, I'll think you'll have the same conclusion as I do. The death of Betsy Faria. Betsy, as we've heard, was a co-worker of Pam at State Farm. She lived close by with her husband Russell Faria and 2 daughters from a previous relationship. In 2010 she was diagnosed with breast cancer, and sadly in 2011 Betsy learned the cancer had metastasized to her liver and was terminal. In December 2011, days before her death and unbeknownst to her family, Betsy changed the sole beneficiary of a $150,000 State Farm life insurance policy from her husband to Pam. Pam originally said that Betsy had asked her to give the money to her daughters when they were older.
I'm going to make you the beneficiary if you could, when my daughters are older, give them some money. I want my kids to have it.
However, tellingly, she later changed her story and said Betsy had wanted her to keep the money for herself.
She didn't want her daughters to have the money. She didn't want her mom to have the money, her sisters to have the money.
So it was your impression that she wanted you to have the money. Is that right?
That's correct.
Betsy's daughter later launched a legal challenge against Pam and her husband to attempt to claim the life insurance policy, which ultimately failed. Pam then admitted that she had lied about what she intended to do with the life insurance proceeds when she said that Betsy had wanted her to give it to her daughters. Now, prosecutors later speculated that Russ had been angered by Betsy's actions and this gave him a motive to kill her. So, a few days after changing her insurance beneficiary to Pam, Betsy underwent chemotherapy. She then visited her mother's house, and after which she was driven home by Pam, the last confirmed person to have seen her alive. Betsy had originally been scheduled to be driven home by Russ, or else stay with her mother, until Pam unexpectedly drove to her mother's house and insisted on driving her home. Pam claimed that she dropped Betsy off at home at approximately 7 p.m. At approximately 7:21 p.m, a call to Betsy from one of her daughters went unanswered. Russ, meanwhile, was spending the evening at his friend Michael Corbin's house, watching movies from 6 p.m. until 9 p.m, when he then drove to an Arby's before returning home. At 9:40 p.m, Russ called 911 saying that he had returned to his home to find his wife had killed herself.
County 911, what is the location of your emergency? Okay, ma'am. Hello?
Hello?
Yes, I need you to take a couple deep breaths so I can see what's going on. What is the address where you need us to come?
130 C-Mac.
Okay, what is the telephone number you're calling from in case we get disconnected?
I don't know this number. I know my cell phone number.
Okay, what is that number?
It's 314-565.
Okay, who am I speaking with?
My name is Russ Faria.
Russell, what's going on there?
I just got home from a friend's house, and my wife killed herself. She's on the floor.
Okay, Russell, I need you to calm down, honey, okay? I need you to calm down, take a couple deep breaths. We're going to get somebody on the way there, okay? What did she do? Do you know?
She got a knife in her neck and she sliced her arms.
Okay, calm down, honey. Is she breathing at all?
No.
Now, Betsy had been stabbed over 55 times, with her wrists cut to the bone and a serrated kitchen knife left lodged in her neck. A second knife was found under a pillow on the couch she was lying on. First responders arrived within 10 minutes and concluded that Betsy had been dead for at least an hour or longer. Her time of death was later reported as being between 7:20 p.m. and 9:41 p.m. The conviction of Russ Faria. Russ was arrested the day after his wife's death. His initial assertion that Betsy had killed herself was considered ludicrous by first responders who saw her body. A police search of the house unearthed a blood-stained pair of slippers in his closet, and his agitated emotional state was seen as highly suspicious by the police. He even failed a polygraph test. When interviewed, Pam claimed that Russ had a violent temper, that he was a heavy drinker, and that he had threatened Betsy, who had been considering leaving him. At Pam's behest, the police searched Betsy's laptop and found a document in which she purportedly expressed fears that her husband would kill her. A crucial piece of evidence was completely overlooked. It was later revealed that the document itself was written in Word 97, software that had not been installed on the laptop, and it was the only document on the laptop with an unknown author. On January the 4th, 2012, the day after Betsy's funeral, Russ was charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action. Unable to make the $250,000 bail, he was held in the county jail until his trial began in November 2013. During Russ's trial, his defense attorney, Joel Schwartz, argued that the testimonies of the 4 friends he had visited, The cell phone records, which showed he was at his friend's house 20 miles away from the murder scene, and evidence of his making purchases from different stores over the course of the evening, demonstrated that the timeline did not allow him to commit the murder. There were no traces of blood on his body or clothes. Prosecuting attorney Leah Askey countered that Russ's friends were providing a false alibi and had conspired with him to perpetrate the murder, including holding onto his cell phone and posing as him to buy food at Arby's to falsify his whereabouts. This was an ultimate role play, as they put it. The trial judge, meanwhile, Chris Menemeyer, refused to allow Russ to present evidence implicating Pam as an alternative suspect in his defence. This suppressed evidence includes cell phone records showing that she had been in the vicinity of the Faria house for up to 30 minutes after the time she claimed to have dropped Betsy off, and also that Betsy had made Pam the sole beneficiary of the life insurance policy shortly before her death. In a secret hearing during the trial, Pam claimed that she had put $100,000 of the insurance money in a trust for Betsy's daughters. However, in a 2014 civil deposition, she admitted that she had not done so. In November 2013, Russ was found guilty, and a month later he was sentenced to life plus 30 years imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Although a central premise of the prosecution's case was that his 4 friends had been complicit in the murder, no charges were ever brought against them. In fact, they were not even aware that they had been implicated by the prosecution in her closing arguments until the media informed them. The sentence was welcomed by Betsy's family, and in an interview given following the sentence, her sister Julie made claims unheard of during the trial. Namely, that Russ had been angered by the removal of his name from the insurance policy, and that he had on one occasion held a pillow on Betsy's face and said, "This is what it feels like to die." Now, in response to the claims, Russ's defence attorney noted that the pillow story had originally been told by Pam. To the world at large, anyway, it seemed that a terrible crime had been solved and the perpetrator had had due punishment. But something wasn't right. The retrial of Russ Faria. When media, and in particular KTVI and the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, started to review the case, they started to uncover anomalies. In February 2014, they reported that Pam had kept the $150,000 rather than put it into a trust for Betsy's daughters. Was anything else wrong? They kept digging. They were able to point to contradictions Pam made during police interviews, such as initially claiming she had not entered the Faria house after driving Betsy home, but later revising this account twice. The 911 operator, who had taken Russ's call and was interviewed, believed he had been genuinely shocked and upset. In yet another twist, the media pair alleged that the prosecutor had been in a relationship with Mike Lang, the then captain of investigations for the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office and one of the investigating officers in the Faria murder case, as well as being a prosecution witness. At least 2 members of the jury in Russ's trial informed the media that this information had been withheld from them. There was a clear conflict of interest going on at the heart of the prosecution. The original trial judge, Menemeyer, rejected the notion for a retrial, but the Missouri Court of Appeals ordered a new trial in 2015. Menemeyer recused herself from the case, and a new trial was granted based on the suppressed evidence that had emerged. During the retrial, Russ's defense was allowed to introduce evidence implicating Pam as the perpetrator. During the trial, CSI agent Amy Buettner, who had examined the crime scene, testified that she believed the slippers found in Russ's closet had not got blooded by stepping in blood. Also, police officers disclosed that Pam, who was not called to testify, had claimed in recent interviews that she and Betsy had been in a sexual relationship. Pam had also told the police that she had, in quotes, remembered seeing Russ and another man in a parked car in a side street outside the Faria house as she drove Betsy home. Russ's conviction was overturned and he was released from prison after having served almost 4 years. In 2016, Russ filed a civil rights lawsuit against the prosecutor Askey and 3 deputy sheriffs on the grounds that they had fabricated evidence, ignored exonerating evidence, and failed to investigate the other obvious subject.
Get back caught up with everybody, feel normal again, no bars or fences. I mean, I think it's still sinking in, really, at this point.
Just the next year, Mennemeyer was suspended by the Supreme Court of Missouri for misconduct, although this was unrelated to the Faria case. In August 2018, both Mennemeyer and Askey, the prosecutor, were voted out of office, a result which was attributed to the mishandling of the murder case and trial. The decision not to investigate Pam was widely criticised. A former employee of the prosecutor's office said, "There were several of us who kept thinking, why are we not pursuing Pam Hupp? They were just locked down on Russ." In January 2018, attorneys acting for Russ deposed Pam as part of his lawsuit against Lincoln County. She declined to answer 92 questions relating to the killing of his wife, and in response to the refusal, Russ's attorneys sought a court order in order to force a response. In March 2020, Russ received a settlement in his civil rights case worth over $2 million. Betsy's daughters, who were highly critical of Russ at the time of his conviction, ultimately issued him an apology in July 2021. The murder of Louis Gumpenberger. Louis Royce Gumpenberger was a resident of Union, Missouri. He had had mental and physical disabilities since he was involved in a car crash in 2005. Shortly after 12 noon on August the 16th, 2016, Louis Gumpenberger died after he was shot 5 times in the hallway of Pam's house in O'Fallon. $900 was found on his body, along with a note bearing instructions to kidnap Pam, get Russ's money from Pam at her bank, and kill Pam. Take Pam to house and get rid of her. Make it look like Russ's wife. Make sure knife sticking out of neck. Now, as Pam had placed 2 calls to 911 shortly before the shooting to report a burglary in process, the audio of this incident was recorded.
"911, what's your emergency?" "Hey, hello, there's someone broken in my house. Help!" "What's the address you're at?" "Help!"
What means can you want me to get your wife?
"No, I'm not getting in the car with you. No, get away.
address?
Get out, get out, get out." "Help!"
What's the address you're at?
Help! Help!
Somebody break her.
No! No!
Hello?
Help! Help!
Ma'am, can you hear me?
Help!
Immediately after the shooting, Pam voluntarily went to the police. Her first words in the recorded interview were, "Is this going to be filmed? Because I always appear on the news with KTVI reporter Chris Hayes." And she went on to say that she blamed Hayes' reporting for attracting threatening people towards her. Pam then went on to claim that Gumpenberger, armed with a knife, had jumped out of a car, driven by another person, into her driveway, accosted her while she sat in her SUV in her garage, and then demanded she drive to a bank to retrieve Russ's money. She claimed that she had knocked the knife out of Gumpenberger's hand with a karate chop and then fled into her house, ultimately shooting Gumpenberger in self-defense with a Ruger LCR she kept on her nightstand after he continued to pursue her.
Came out and did this right in front of my driveway, and I looked up because it was so fast and startling, and somebody jumped out, and I was like, wow, somebody, I don't know what I thought, if somebody was hurt, I don't know what was going on. It was so fast. And then he ran up. I was halfway out the drive where I was parked, and he jumped in my car. He opened up the door and jumped in my car.
Which door?
The passenger.
Front or back?
Oh, front.
Or passenger front? Go ahead.
And he had a bunch of stuff in his hands. I don't know what he had, but he had a knife also, but he had something in his other arm. I don't know what he had. And he put a knife and kept going, just yelling random stuff like, you're gonna take me to the bank and get Russ's money. Take me to the bank, you're gonna take me to the bank. He put a knife up to my throat there and was yelling stuff. And he kept looking behind him like this. So I put it in gear, and I was thinking how I was going to get out of there when he was looking, and he kept yelling, coming back, and then he looked back again, and I hit his arm with the knife and then shot.
Attorneys and the police theorised that Pam had lured Gumpenberger to her home by presenting herself as Kathy, a producer for the television programme Dateline NBC, and offered to pay him to reenact a 911 call. She then shot him in order to implicate Russ in an attempt on her life and, in quotes, take the heat off her, after which she placed the knife, the note and the money on Gumpenberger's body. Gumpenberger was believed to have been selected at random. Several pieces of incriminating evidence were unearthed. Cell phone records showed that Pam had been in Gumpenberger's neighbourhood right at the supposed attacker's front door less than 1 hour before the shooting, casting doubt on her claim that she had never met him before. In 2016, a police report had been filed stating that a woman matching Pam's description had approached a lady called Carol Alford, posing as a Dateline NBC producer and offering her $1,000 to reenact a 911 call. Security camera footage showed that the woman in question had been driving Pam's car. A second witness, Brent Charlton, informed police that Pam had approached him with a similar proposition. Police investigators found 9 $100 bills in Gumpenberger's pocket. A 10th found on Pam's dresser had a sequential serial number to 4 of the 9 bills. Investigators also suggested that the knife had been purchased at the Dollar Tree in O'Fallon alongside several other items which were found in Pam's house. For example, the paper on which the note found on Gumpenberger's body had been written was also thought to have been bought by Pam. The knife found in Pam's car was found wedged between the passenger seat and the central console in exactly the same way that Pam stored knives in her kitchen, wedged between the stove and the counter. This is slightly difficult to explain, but an image of her kitchen with the knives stored in the same way as in the car should explain things. A carpet swatch found by police appeared to have been positioned in just the right way to protect a rug in Pam's home from Gumpenberger's blood, suggesting she knew exactly what she was about to do. Police investigators were also very sceptical that Gumpenberger would have been able to carry out the acts Pam said he had, given his mental and physical disabilities. The charging of Pam Hupp. In August 2016, Pam was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. When arrested, she asked to visit a bathroom, where she proceeded to use a ballpoint pen to stab her neck and wrists in an apparent suicide attempt. Her bail was set at $2 million and she appeared in court in 2017 pleading not guilty. Prosecutors stated that they would seek the death penalty due to the apparent arbitrary choice of Gumpenberger as the victim. Instead of contesting the charges when it did get to the trial, Pam entered an Alford plea, waiving her right to a jury trial, and as a result of this she did not face the death penalty. She was sentenced to life without parole. In a phone call to her then husband, Pam claimed that she had pleaded guilty so her family would not have to witness an ugly trial. In 2019, Gumpenberger's mother, Margaret Birch, filed a lawsuit for wrongful death, fraud and misrepresentation against the incarcerated Pam. and in July 2020 Birch was awarded a judgment of $3 million. Her attorney, Gary Berger, filed to garnish Pam's prison trust account, into which her $1,200 COVID-19 CARES Act relief stimulus was paid. In September 2020, Pam's husband Mark filed for divorce, describing their marriage as irretrievably broken. The retrial for the murder of Betsy. Lincoln County Prosecuting Attorney Mike Wood announced that he would be reopening the Betsy Faria homicide investigation, and in July 2021, Pam was interviewed in connection with the murder of Betsy for the first time. Later that year in 2021, Pam was charged with the first-degree murder of Betsy Faria and with armed criminal action. The claim was that Pam murdered Betsy for financial gain and that the prosecution would seek the death penalty due to the heinousness and depravity of the crime. The prosecution claim is that Pam repeatedly stabbed Betsy while she was asleep on her sofa and weakened from her chemotherapy. She then removed Betsy's socks and used them to spread blood around the house to try to give the impression of domestic violence before replacing them on Betsy's feet. The court documents noted the following points. Pam had been named the sole beneficiary on a $150,000 life insurance policy held by Betsy days before the murder. Following her death, she didn't give any of the money from the policy to Betsy's daughters, despite her reported wishes. Pam insisted on driving Betsy home from a chemotherapy treatment, despite Betsy already having transportation arranged, and despite Pam claiming not to be familiar with the Troy area. The position of Betsy's body suggested that she was murdered by someone she trusted. And finally, Pam texted home to Betsy's phone at 7:20 p.m, yet cell phone records show that Pam's cell phone was still in the vicinity of Faria's home at the time. It was also claimed that by the time of Russ's second trial, the original prosecutors were acting to protect their own civil liability rather than seeking justice. A destruction order had been made in November 2015 at the time of Russ's acquittal, but fortunately this never took place. Had it been done, the order would have resulted in physical evidence connected with the case being destroyed. In July 2021, Pam entered a not guilty plea. A preliminary hearing was scheduled for February 22, but this has been delayed indefinitely after Pam's public defender unfortunately died of a heart attack. In August 2022, Pam waived her rights to the preliminary hearing, and an arraignment is scheduled for October the 28th before Judge Milan Berry. You might think that this brings us up to date with the affairs of Pam Hupp, but you'd be wrong. Let's go back in time around 10 years and let's introduce to you Shirley Newman. The death of Shirley Newman. Shirley May Newman, Pam's mother, lived alone in a third-floor apartment in the Lakeview Park in Fenton. She suffered both from dementia and arthritis. Shirley spent the night of October the 29th, 2013 with Pam following a hospital visit. At approximately 5 p.m. the next day, Pam dropped her mother off at her apartment, instructing staff not to expect her for dinner that evening or breakfast the following day. A housekeeper found Newman dead beneath the balcony of her home at 2:30 p.m. the next day. The aluminium balcony railing above her body was broken, and following a police investigation, Assistant Medical Examiner Raj Nanduri concluded that Newman had died from blunt trauma to the chest, resulting from an accidental fall. However, one unusual fact was found during her autopsy. Over 8 times the expected amount of the sedative zolpidem was found in her blood compared with what would be expected from a normal dose. The month after Shirley's death, the police received an anonymous note suggesting Pam, the last known person to have seen Newman alive, had murdered her mother for the life insurance. Apparently, Pam and her siblings each received approximately $125,000 each in payouts from Shirley's estate. Incredibly, earlier that year, prior to her mother's death, Pam had been videotaped saying, "My mum's worth $500,000 that I'll get when she dies, and if I really wanted money, there was an easier way to get it than trying to combat someone that's physically stronger than me."
I really hate to say it, wanted money. My mom's worth $500,000 that I get when she dies. My mom is dementia and doesn't half the time know who we are.
Right.
Has been living alone in a condo. And I know that sounds really morbid and stuff like that, but I am a life insurance person. But if I really wanted money, there was an easier way than trying to combat somebody that's physically stronger than me. I'm just saying.
The police reopened the investigation into Shirley, but after interviewing the housekeeper who had found Newman's body and Newman's son Michael, both who said that Newman was unsteady, they again concluded that her death was accidental. Unbelievably, at least, in hindsight, they did not interview Pam. After Pam was charged with the murder of Gumpenberger and the investigation into Shirley's death was reopened, again Shirley's son Michael reiterated that he believed his mother's death was accidental. The chief medical examiner for St. Louis County, however, changed the manner of Newman's death from accidental to undetermined, stating that since Shirley's death, many things have happened that involved the daughter, and so all of those investigations became pertinent information. I was no longer willing to say it could be an accident. The investigation into Shirley's death has not since been reopened. Media coverage. If it weren't for the media coverage, it isn't clear that the thing about Pam would have been uncovered. Let's go through some of the coverage that has been pivotal in getting to the truth.
Something happened, Minnie. Something terrible.
And just before I do that, if you've liked this content, then please consider subscribing. It is appreciated, really. And if you hit the notification bell, then you won't miss out on future videos when they're released. St. Louis station KTVI originally broke the Betsy Faria story, reporting continuously on the case from 2011 through to 2022, and in the process generated more than 50 reports and investigations. Chris Hayes of KTVI was the only reporter to attend Russ's trial in November 2013, and he was the first to report questions about Pam that same month. Upon his release from prison, Russ thanked Hayes for his coverage. Betsy's murder has been the subject of 6 Dateline NBC episodes: The House on Sumac Drive, Game Night, Return to Game Night, Stranger Than Fiction, The Thing About Pam, and The Real Thing About Pam. As of 2019, the murder had received more coverage from Dateline than any other subject aside from the O.J. Simpson murder case and the death of John Benet Ramsey. In 2019, the murder of Louis Gumpenberger was then the subject of a Dateline NBC true crime podcast and spent several weeks as one of the most popular Apple broadcasts. The Thing About Pam, a miniseries starring Renée Zellweger, who had become interested in the case after becoming obsessed with the Dateline NBC podcast, began airing in March 2022. A book, Countdown to Murder, Pam Hupp, by Rebecca Pittman, was published in 2021, and finally a book about the murder of Betsy Faria, co-authored by Joel Schwartz, Russ's lawyer, and Charles Bosworth Jr., called Bone Deep: Untangling the Betsy Faria Murder Case, was published in 2022. So next steps in this whole saga? Well, we heard that the arraignment in Betsy Faria's trial is due on October the 28th, 2022, and we'll find out what next steps there are after that hearing. Until then, bye for now.